Hello, South Africa. My name is Kwena Maloto, coming to you live today from Johannesburg, where the DA is set to unveil its bold new economic policy. Now, we are on a mission to rescue South Africa, and we have a plan. We have consulted the best economic minds inside the country to put this policy together. We have a plan to grow the economy. We have a plan to create 2 million new jobs, and the DA Federal Leader John Steenhuisen, as well as various other DA leaders, will be addressing us shortly to unpack this policy. Now, as we continue on this mission to rescue South Africa, we need all of your support. If you are unavailable to vote on Election Day on the 29th of May, please go to wheretovote.da.org.za and we can help you register for a special vote. Please like and share this broadcast with your family and friends using the hashtag Rescue South Africa and hashtag DA Economic Policy. We want to hear from you. But before we go to the podium to hear from DA Federal Leader John Steenhuisen, I am joined by the DA Shadow Minister for Finance, Dion George. Dion, how does it feel to be here today as we unpack this economic policy, and why is this so important for the people of South Africa?
Well, it's a very exciting day today because this is the first update of our economic policy in quite a while. Now, of course, we know that our economy is struggling, it is not growing, the number of unemployed people is increasing over time, and also households are battling to put enough food on their table, and there are 5 million starving children in South Africa today. This is a major problem, but the wonderful and exciting thing is that we can rescue our economy, and that is what this policy is all about. Our policy unit, as mentioned earlier, has spent a long time. It's been over a year in the making. They got together with the best economic minds in South Africa and all of us participating to develop a product that will take South Africa forward. It will take time, obviously, to fix our economy, but it is fixable, and now is the time to do it. So that's why it's so important when people vote on the 29th of May that they're voting for a party that can rescue our economy. Because if we don't do that, we are just going to have more and more problems in the economic space, and obviously that spills over into the lives of South Africans. So our policy is comprehensive, it is exciting, it is new, it is innovative, and we believe it is the blueprint that we can build this economic recovery on.
Now, Dion, we know that South Africans are hungry for jobs. Do you believe that this economic policy can tackle unemployment in the country?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, it will take time, but the crucial thing is that our economy is structured in the wrong way. So what we have is a dysfunctional and corrupt government at the center of our economy. The government thinks that it can make central plans, which it cannot do. And that reflects in our economy and in economic policy. What the DA has done is looked at a number of policy areas where we can make those improvements. They have to be incremental. So, for example, we look at trade policy, we look at fiscal policy, we look at industrial policy, we look at labor policy. We look at all those impediments, those things that are getting in the way of people finding jobs and getting on with their lives. Those are the fundamental things we've looked at. We've also very crucially looked at how can we accelerate economic growth. So how do we get business operating? How do we get entrepreneurs working? Because that's where we're going to generate the jobs. So this policy basically starts at the bottom. The bottom basically says is, what are the things that need to be in place for an economy to thrive? So, for example, we need to look at the hierarchy. We need safety and security. We need those measures where government is, for example, implementing tax measures that can encourage people to get into entrepreneurship and for businesses to thrive. And then, of course, for labor policies to get out of the way. We have stifling labor policy, and we have come up with a certificate, which we will announce later, basically that allows younger workers between the age of 18 and 35 who've not worked over the past 12 months to exempt themselves from the labor dispensation. This basically gives people agency and gives them the power to decide what their future should be, rather than be stuck with a a government that made policies that is effectively keeping them out of the job market, although they're hungry and excited to actually get going with their jobs, with their lives. That is what we want to deliver to South Africa today.
Now, Dion, we know there are so many hopeless South Africans inside this country. Do you feel that this economic policy can kickstart our economy and also, really rescue South Africa?
Yes, we definitely believe that is the case. For example, if we look at our industrial policy, government has decided that it can pick winners and losers. We are saying that needs to change. So what we need to do is look at the fundamental building blocks of the industrial policy. We also need to look at our trade policy. We also need to look, for example, at export duties. There's a thing called export duties. Why is that there? So we need to remove that. So if we look at accelerating the economy on a global scale. So, for example, inviting those investors that have taken 1 trillion rand out of our economy in the last decade, inviting them back. And the way that you do that, which also costs no money, is to look, for example, at sentiment. So, for example, when the DA leads the government, we will be able to go across the world. We'll be able to look foreign investors in the eyes and say, South Africa has changed. We are open for business. Bring back that trillion rand that you've taken away. Also, very, very importantly, we need to tackle endemic corruption. Corruption is killing the economy. So what we need to do is identify those people that are committing financial crimes in our economy, catch them, and put them into jail, because that will start turning the tide. Because once people realize, don't do this because you will be held to account, they'll stop doing it. And that costs us nothing. It's just political will that government doesn't have. So the DA has the political will to do that and also make those bold choices that gets government out of the way and gets people to become the agents of their own destiny, as they should be, with the support of a government that is enabling the economy and not getting in its way.
Now, Dion, I don't want you to give away too much before we move to the press briefing, but can you tell us what are the key focus areas of this economic policy?
Well, the key areas to say, how do we liberate our economy from our broken government? So that's the overarching idea here. We've also looked very closely, for example, at labour policy. We know that labour policy is crushing jobs. We're looking at the minimum wage. So, for example, we're looking at basically working that out of the system over time so that people can actually find employment at a price that the market can actually take and accept, because at the moment we are pricing people with lower skills out of the market. So that's one of the cornerstones here. Also, if we look, for example, at industrial policy, what we are doing is a completely different way of looking at industrial policy. So instead of government picking the winners and then subsidizing them, allowing the market to work in a more effective way. So when business, for example, is growing, when entrepreneurs are coming through, looking at that and finding mechanisms that can subsidize those type of business that have been picked by the market, not by the government, because they become inherently incapable of actually growing. Also, very importantly, we always talk about the state-owned enterprises. That is fundamental. We need to dismantle them. That's been our long-standing policy. We talk about that every year in our alternative budget, and that's a very strong theme that comes through. Basically a restructuring of our economy so that we can focus it on a growth path rather than a downward spiral that we're on at the moment.
Now, Dion, we heard disturbing news just a few weeks ago. EFF leader saying that in a doomsday coalition of the EFF and the ANC, that Floyd Shivambu could be the finance minister. What would this mean for South Africa?
Well, actually, frankly, it's a horrific idea. I actually serve with Floyd Shivambu in the Standing Committee on Finance, and his understanding of economics is very, very troubling. He does not understand the concept of a market being efficient. What he sees very much is government needs to intervene because it can make the choices that people can't. It's very much a socialist, communist type of model. And also he's got this private members bill that won't be featured in this term, but basically to to nationalize the Reserve Bank. Now that's an enormous problem, because what we know is what the EFF is good at is actually stealing people's money. So for example, if we look at VBS Bank, we saw the fiasco over there. So if we can imagine a doomsday coalition where we've got the ANC and the EFF and then Floyd Shivambu as the Minister of Finance, we can just imagine what will happen to the rand. What we are seeing already is that the markets are starting to price in quite a noisy and choppy election, and we can see in the US dollar to rand exchange rate at that we've actually depreciated. So the markets are feeling quite skittish at the moment. Now, if you put somebody like Floyd Shivambu into that very important role, we can only expect our economy to get worse, sentiment to get worse, and of course the wholesale theft that the EFF gets so good at to continue, and that's unacceptable. So it's incredibly important what happens on the 29th of May.
Okay, and I can see that our federal leaders are at the podium. I'm going to allow you to get go, but please do stay tuned. South Africa, as we said, we are launching our bold new economic policy. We'll be heading over to the podium now.
Good morning, everyone. It's exactly 10 o'clock, and as we said, we'll start on time. My name is Malatsi. I'm the party's national spokesperson. We are here today to unveil one of our key manifesto priorities around the economy. It's the DA's plan to unleash enterprise, grow the economy, and create jobs. And for this purpose, we are joined by the DA's head of policy, Matt Cuthbert. We are also joined by the DA's shadow minister of finance, Dion, and also his deputy and the Deputy Federal Council Chairperson, Ashor Sarupen, and the DA Federal Leader John Steenhuisen. I'm going to call on our Head of Policy to kick it off, and then each of the individuals will have their speaking slot. As is customary, at the end we will take questions.
So many microphones. The DA is proud to announce the launch of our party's bold new economic policy, which will unleash enterprise, grow the economy, and create approximately 2 million new jobs. South Africa is in serious economic turmoil, characterized by one of the world's worst unemployment crises, spiraling public debt, a shrinking tax base, uncompetitive local industries, and threats to the independence of the South African Reserve Bank. The need for bold and forward-thinking economic reform has never been more pressing, and the DA has just the solutions required to rescue our economy. Our policy, which is being unveiled today, is the DA's first comprehensive economic policy since 2014. Our plan targets key areas such as supporting startups, stabilizing our fiscus, prioritizing labor reforms, and enhancing international trade. When implemented, this policy will chart a bold path forward for South Africa to a future characterized by increased opportunities and economic prosperity for all. The DA's plan to rescue the economy begins with improving the ease of doing business and recognizing the vital role of small businesses and entrepreneurship in driving economic growth and development in South Africa. The DA will assist small businesses by creating the optimal conditions for launching new businesses. Some of the mechanisms include removing the import duties on critical business tools, establishing resources and facilities to support small businesses and job creation, and reforming the regulatory environment to create a conducive business environment. South Africa's fiscal situation is rapidly deteriorating, with high levels of debt and escalating interest payments. Our debt payments are reducing the budget available for frontline service delivery, which affects the poorest South Africans the most. The DA will ensure that the South African state has the fiscal space to deliver on its constitutional mandate by reducing the national debt through the introduction of a fiscal rule in the expenditure framework, increasing financial literacy amongst households to boost savings and investments, and continuing to prioritize government grants within the national budget. The DA is further committed to responsible monetary policy by committing to the independence of the South African Reserve Bank. The DA will seek to restore stability and resilience in South Africa's monetary landscape and reduce government-administered pricing in specific sectors. Unemployment is a national crisis, and the DA's labour policies will place a focus on growing jobs and providing unemployed South Africans with a pathway out of poverty and into prosperity. A job provides vastly more dignity and financial security to a person than a government grant. And increased employment results in lower overall grant spending, which frees up the budget for critical services and infrastructure improvements. To enhance job creation and employment, the DA's labour policy will address the harmful effects of the minimum wage on employment levels, promote the principle of non-racialism in the labour market, improve the accountability of unions and the functioning of collective bargaining, and specifically utilise special economic zones to test labour policy changes. The DA will overhaul South Africa's dysfunctional industrial policy by not implementing policies that pick industry winners and losers, but instead focusing on getting the basics right within the policy pyramid. This is necessary as the current government's intervention
Rand, nearly 3 times the amount government spends on healthcare, and 600 billion more than the entire police budget itself. Financial criminals must understand that the DA has the political will to put them in jail. We will find, prosecute, and punish corrupt individuals, and this will serve as a warning to others involved in corrupt activity that crime doesn't pay, and that will start a new culture of zero tolerance to corruption and improve investor sentiment. Our economy cannot grow in an environment where the ANC continues to double down on unworkable policies, such as the unconstitutional and unaffordable national health insurance. South Africa's economy will not survive another term of the ANC's astounding economic illiteracy. Our economy has been at a standstill for nearly a decade and a half. South Africans are becoming poorer by the day. Never in our democratic history have citizens, households, and businesses experienced this level of financial distress. The cost of food, fuel, and electricity has soared. Lending rates are high, and price inflation is out of control, while factories battle to produce anything of value because rolling blackouts have grinded production lines to a halt. The collapse of PRASA and Transnet, which in 2023 cost our economy 100 billion rand, forces whatever little is produced to be transported by road. No modern economy can hope to achieve growth in such an environment. The ANC government does not care about the 81% of households that skip at least one meal a day, or about the 5 million children starving in South Africa today. It only cares about maintaining its patronage network as it clings desperately to power. Earlier this month, the International Monetary Fund in their Economic Outlook report stated that it expects the South African economy to grow by a mere 0.9%. This is lower than both the National Treasury and the South African Reserve Bank's projections. If the status quo is to remain, government will again collect less than expected in tax revenue and will have to either raise taxes on South Africans or borrow more because it is unable to responsibly manage public funds. Both routes are highly undesirable. Although South Africa is beset by one of the world's most onerous tax regimes, given that our tax to GDP ratio sits at a dangerously high 25.5%, there is simply not any room left for expanding this burden on what is already a shrinking tax base. Today, 1 rand out of every 5 rand collected in tax is used to service interest charges on our 5.2 trillion rand debt bill. This is money that is supposed to be spent on delivering high-quality healthcare, education, and community-focused policing. If government wants to borrow more, it will crowd out even more basic service delivery, and our children and their children will be left to pay the ANC's apathy. Hidden in their party's manifesto, a third option exists for the ANC government, which is to steal the pension funds of hard-working South Africans through prescribed assets. The DA will not allow this, and we will fight it every step of the way. Instead, a DA government can promise a workable alternative. In February, the DA set out our budget that details how we will achieve better fiscal outcomes in a tax-neutral environment. It, guided by our new economic policy framework, proposes innovative solutions to attract foreign capital, encourage domestic savings, change the model for state-owned enterprises, fix our crumbling infrastructure, enhance labour market participation, bolster corruption-busting institutions, and facilitate the expansion of both the small and large business sectors. This is why a DA-led government will adopt ruthless and targeted growth-focused reforms that puts the well-being of South African households first. To rescue South Africa, we must first remove this broken government and elect a party that can unlock our country's limitless potential. That opportunity is coming up soon. Do not miss it.
Thank you very much, and greetings to members of the media and all those who are watching at home as well. It's wonderful to be able to be with you today to unveil this groundbreaking policy which is going to stand the DA in very good stead going into this election, and for the years to come. Unemployment is undoubtedly the single biggest crisis that South Africa faces. The fact that over 70 out of every 100 young people aged between the ages of 18 and 24 and 42 out of every 100 work seekers overall cannot find a job to feed their families and to build a better future is the original sin of the incumbent ANC government. Even on the narrow definition of unemployment, which excludes those people who have given up on ever finding a job, the number of jobless South Africans of working age has the number of jobless South Africans of working age has increased from 20% in 1994 to nearly 33% today. This unemployment crisis, created by the ANC, is a crime against the people of South Africa. And the DA is here today to tell the people of South Africa that it doesn't have to be this way. South Africa can be rescued from the unemployment crisis that has robbed millions of citizens of a brighter future that we have all dreamed of since 1994. We do not have to accept the joblessness in South Africa because it is not a natural phenomenon. It is not normal. Viewed in the global context, a 33% unemployment rate is not normal. It is fundamentally abnormal. A 70% youth unemployment rate is not normal. It is absolutely abnormal. The fact that 10 million people in our country cannot find work is not the result of a force of nature. That South Africa today has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world is entirely a man-made disaster. It is a disaster designed and executed by the men and women of the ANC. It is because of the deliberate choices made by those men and women in the ANC that 309,000 manufacturing jobs have been destroyed completely over the last 16 years. And it is because of those deliberate choices that have been made that the tax base has shrunk to the point where we now have one of the highest tax burdens in the world, with a tax to GDP ratio, as Dr. George said, of 25.5%. It is because of these deliberate choices of the ANC that we've been plunged into a fiscal crisis where 1 out of every 5 rand is being used to pay down our debt. And it is because of the deliberate choices of the ANC that over 30 million citizens in our country today live in desperate poverty below the poverty line. However, the fact that the lack of jobs in our country is a man-made crisis, the good news is that it means that the South African people have the power to fix this crisis. It is because of the human choices that we sit with this huge unemployment rate today, but that also means that we have the power as citizens to turn that around. I'm very proud today to launch this economic policy today, and I do want to pause here to pay tribute to our head of policy, Matthew Cuthbert, and his incredible team, who have spent enormous hours going through this particular policy, making sure that it is costed, making sure that it is credible, so that when we make our pledges around job creation, it's not a thumbsuck, it's not pie in the sky, it's not promising words on a poster. It's bounded in economic reality, and the economic reality we find ourselves in South Africa. And Matthew, from my side, I want to say a huge thank you to you and your team for the incredible work that's been done on a policy that is absolutely incredible. It's built, very simply, on a fundamental truth that the wrong choices made by the wrong people have led to the wrong outcomes, and that better choices made by the right people can transform this and solve this crisis. And so our plan to unleash enterprise, to grow the economy, and to create jobs spells out in very clear detail what these better choices are, and confirms that the DA is the right party to be able to create jobs in South Africa and liberate the people of the country from 30 years of failed policies that have pushed 12 million South Africans into the unemployment queue, and which force many of our citizens, far, far too many, to live under the yoke of economic disaster. So this is a historic moment, not only for our party, but I also think for South Africa. This detailed policy has been developed in consultation with some of the best economic thinkers in the world, and it's built on global examples of best practice. It presents, I believe, the most compelling and exciting economic offer that South Africans have seen in a generation. It introduces a fundamentally clean break from the destructive statist policies that have created the unemployment crisis, but it also sets down South Africa on a path towards growth, lots of growth, based on modern, pragmatic, and fit-for-purpose strategies. At the DA's National Manifesto launch in February, I announced that the first and most important pledge that we were making as a party to the people of South Africa in this election is to deliver 2 million new jobs and to lay the foundation for a new, rapidly growing, modern and vibrant economy. And the policy that we launched today shows why this is a credible undertaking, why it is achievable, and why it is an urgent pledge that any government that the DA will be part of after the election will deliver on. It's all built on getting the right people into government so that those people can make the better choices that South Africans desperately need. It sets out how we're going to improve the ease of doing business, which alone will unlock between 250,000 and 400,000 new jobs. Through making better fiscal choices, we will generate another 250,000 to 500,000 new jobs. Reforming labour policies through better choices, including our introduction of the Youth Employment Opportunity Certificate, will unleash hundreds of thousands more jobs for young people in South Africa. One of the most heartbreaking things for me as a political leader is to travel around the country and see young graduates who've done the work at TVETs and universities, standing at traffic lights, clutching their certificates, begging for jobs. It cannot be right that young graduates with these skills cannot find work in our economy. Coupled with making better choices on collective bargaining to expand representation and exempt small, medium, and micro enterprises from agreements they cannot afford, we believe will ignite the creation of a further 500,000 to 1 million new jobs. Add to this the better choices that we will make on industrial policy that will generate between 250,000 and 500,000 new jobs, as well as better choices on trade policy, which will add another 100,000 to 150,000 jobs. Unlike those other parties that are thumb-sucking jobs, promising jobs in every home, etc., we know exactly that today is the inflection point for our party, because we know that when we make a commitment to South Africans that we can build 2 million new jobs, we can back that up with evidence-based economics that's sound and in which we've accepted best practice from all over the world. It is also an inflection point for our party because it signifies that we've fully ascended to a party that's not confining itself to forever being in opposition, but to the level that is required to actually govern a country. It is a serious policy, and a policy that shows South Africans that we are serious about governing. After decades of growth through governing dozens of municipalities and major provinces of learning and internal reform, the DA steps up today far more confident, more prepared, and more determined than we have ever been before to rescue the whole of South Africa from unemployment. The adoption of this policy announces to the world that the DA has fully embraced the responsibility that we feel to the people of South Africa to create a credible alternative government that will solve the most urgent crises that plague our society. And there can be no more urgent crisis than the unemployment crisis, which we tackle head on from today with this policy. It is also a signal that the DA is mature, that it knows that the ANC is set to lose its majority in little over a month's time, and one that is fully prepared to be able to step in and take over government as an anchor tenant in any new government. We launched this policy today because the DA's time has come. We are prepared for what awaits us and what will be demanded of us in the coming months. But more importantly, this policy is an inflection point for our country, South Africa. Meticulously researched, it's built on only the cold, hard facts of what works to grow business and employment all around the world. With the election now little more than a month away, the DA's historic new economic policy provides voters with a detailed roadmap about just how we will rescue the country from unemployment. And every single voter who wants a brighter future for themselves and for their children, who wants to find a job in a growing economy, and who wants to put food on the table and build a better future for the children that they themselves have had, that we will see in this plan the most riveting and hopeful opportunity in 30 years. In this election, a vote for the DA is a vote for a strong, experienced party with a track record of delivery that will carry this economic policy into any coalition negotiations and the formation of a new national government to deliver 2 million jobs over the next 5 years, and to lay the foundation for a future where every single South African can find work to build a better life. As in life, politics is about choices. And with the launch of this policy today, the DA announces that we have made the courageous choice to step up like we have never done before, to address the single most urgent crisis facing our nation and our citizens. We now also call upon our citizens and the people of South Africa to equally act with boldness in making a new choice, striking out in a new direction by voting the DA into national government on the 29th of May. For 30 years, we've elected the wrong people who've made the wrong choices, and our citizens are now bearing the brunt of it. On the 29th of May, let's elect the right people who will make the right choices to restore the hope and dignity of every South African that only a secure job can provide. I have so much confidence and faith in this policy, and I hope that those who watched the News 24 debate amongst the leaders yesterday evening will see how important it is that we have an honest conversation and an honest debate around the future of our economy and how we create jobs. And I'm issuing a challenge today, because I'm so confident in my policy, to the President Cyril Ramaphosa to stop hiding away. Let's have an honest, open and frank debate about the future of South Africa and the choices that lie before the people today. I will bring my policies and I will happily debate them with you toe to toe, and let the South African people decide who they trust to create jobs, to steer the economy, to rescue our country, and to provide a better future for all of us in this country that we love. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, colleagues. Now it's your awaited opportunity for questions. We've got a roving mic amongst you, so Rob will be assisting you with that. Can I get a sense by indication of hands, those of you who are keen to have questions? Cool, I see 3, so we'll take those. Oh, you'll be the 4th one. Let's start with you at the base. Is it Sisanda, right? Yes. Yeah, we'll start with Sisanda, then Natasha will be the 2nd one, you'll be the 3rd, and we'll finalize with the Sundance.
All right.
Yeah.
Sit down.
Do you need a pen? I've got a pen for you. Sure. Sisanda, let's go.
All right. Good morning. My name is Sisanda Mboleka from the Sunday Times. In your policy, you speak of converting the social distress grant into a job seekers grant, and you further say that you'll require beneficiaries to show evidence of intention to start a small business or evidence that they are job seeking. What does that entail? What kind of evidence would they have to prove that they are actively seeking employment or that they have the intention to start a small business? And secondly, you also speak of the grant continuation only remaining viable if there's economic growth and sufficient tax revenue to fund it. What happens in the instance that global trends affect our own economy, resulting in stagnation and no growth. Does that then mean you're intending to stop the grant in that event? And what will then happen to beneficiaries and the indigent who rely on this grant while they wait for their economy to recover and grow again? Thank you very much.
Cool, thanks. So we'll take all the questions and then do the responses together. Natasha?
It's Natasha Perry here from SABC News. Mr. Steenhuisen, if I can just move away from today's briefing, but I mean, you tabled a briefing on you tabled a briefing on the eve of Freedom Day. I just want his honest reflections over the past 30 years, how you as a DA leader, your honest reflections, how you think our country has actually performed, how the current government of the day has actually performed, and what the DA could actually do better in the context of today's briefing. And then furthermore, just your reaction on the by-elections that took place. You lost a ward, you won one ward, and you retained 3 wards. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Sorry.
Third one. But I think in recognition of your own prelude, we'll take your question right at the end and then do the others, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Cuthbert from Cuthbert.
Sure.
Can I just ask on Minister Kudemantashe, he has said that he's opposed to BHP's proposed buyout of Anglo. What is the DA's position on that? Is there a problem with big international companies leaving South Africa?
No, go ahead, sorry. Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Let's have the 4th one here.
Thank you so much. It's Peter Molemani, Kaya News. Please share your plans in creating these 2 million jobs. Where will these jobs be coming from? And then also, how are you going to make easier for businesses to hire the 12 million employable individuals? Lastly, is the current approach used by government to address load shedding working? If not, what is it that the DA is planning to do different to the ANC government to stop load shedding? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. So in terms of how we'll structure the responses, Matt, do you want to start off? And then both Dion and Ashor will have a bit. Ashor will deal with the question around the by-elections because they relate to the campaign, and John will have the final thoughts once we have done with all the questions, Natasha. Cool. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks very much, Solly. So I'll speak to the questions that directly relate to the policy. And I understand that Ashor would like to add to this specifically on the global trends. The specific question regarding the conversion of the SRD grant to a job seekers grant was actually asked to us by the Sunday Times at the launch of our manifesto. And we have supplied you with a response, but I'll do it in repetition just to make sure that we're on the same page. What we have said continuously about the conversion of the SRD grant into a job seekers grant is that we want to incentivize people to find employment, and we want to create opportunities for them to go out there and be able to live a life of dignity, and one in which they're able to move up the social mobility ladder. Ultimately, we need to activate people like we've done in the Western Cape with our job seekers voucher. We've given people an opportunity to get transport to go out and find work, and we believe that we could convert the SRD grant into something similar. In terms of the fiscal space, we would be dishonest if we said that we didn't have sufficient fiscal space and sufficient economic growth, and we said that we would promise something in perpetuity. And ultimately, by implementing our plan, we will be able to generate growth and be able to increase the tax take so that we are able to continue providing these kinds of services. However, we must be realistic and honest with voters and not merely promise things that we can't deliver on. And that's why we say any further commitment to policy initiatives must be based on the fact that we have sufficient revenue to be able to cover that. And I think that's a fairly reasonable position to take. In terms of the question from Kaya News specifically. I think we've detailed exactly where the reforms will come from in the specific areas. If you go through the document itself, it outlines each set of reforms and how we will specifically focus on making sure that we get it easier for people to start businesses, easier for them to find employment, and the specific numbers are in that document, and I'm happy to point them out to you after the fact. Specifically regarding load shedding, in our manifesto, we commit to creating a new culture of prosumers where people not only consume electricity, but they are able to produce electricity and sell that back to the grid. We believe that this helps us diversify our energy mix and creates a situation where we've got a more competitive energy security environment, as opposed to relying on the behemoth Eskom, which has failed to keep the lights on. And we believe that this new alternative approach has already taken hold. You would have seen that Eskom most recently reported that the uptake of solar installations and rooftop solar in households has made a significant impact in ameliorating the load shedding crisis. And these are the kinds of policies and solutions we've been implementing for a number of years in the city of Cape Town and in the Western Cape. I'll hand over to Ashor regarding the international trends.
So, Sisanda, I think that it is a fallacy to presume that if there are global issues that affect South Africa, that suddenly grants would stop. That's not what we said at all. But I do think it's important to debunk the excuses that the ANC have made for the last 15 years about how crises have affected the South African economy. It is true that after the 2008 financial crisis, both in South Africa and abroad, employment and figures dropped quite substantially. But by 2016, if you look at OECD data, the entire global economy had recovered and there were more jobs all over the world except South Africa by 2016. So it was an 8-year recovery, but there was a full recovery by 2016 globally in terms of job numbers. Then when you look at COVID, it is also true. In 2020, there's a dramatic decline in global employment. But by 2022, if you look at OECD countries, 70% of its working age population was back in employment. So it's simply not true that global trends are causing the stagnation in South Africa. Shocks do happen, but countries all over, even our African peers, have recovered and recovered extremely strongly, and more people across this continent are employed now than they were before COVID, except in South Africa. We have now just reached, again, 2017 levels of job numbers. So it does show you that there is a fundamental problem with the structure of this economy and the policies pursued that mean that when there are shocks domestically, we don't get the same recovery that we do globally. And I'd encourage everyone to look at the OECD data on jobs, because that shows you that there's a major, major problem. That's the first question I wanted to handle. The second question is in relation to the by-elections. And I just want to make the following point, that on Wednesday night, in 4 by-elections where we contested, we went forward substantially. We got to heights of 90% of the votes in places where we hadn't had such high levels of support before. And there was fierce contestation by various small parties across the board. So it doesn't make these things easy, but it shows that confidence in the DA is strong. And what was more significant in those by-elections is when you look at the raw vote tallies, more people voted for the DA in many of these by-elections in raw votes, in a by-election where there's ultra-low turnout, than came out in a general election, the last municipal elections, where there was higher turnout. So in raw votes, we grew our numbers in many of these by-elections. Even though turnout was as low as 20%, we were still getting, in many cases, as many or more votes as we got in 2021. Now, of course, I'm sure what you wanted to ask us about was Swartland's by-election, where we lost marginally by 28 votes. Also there, we got more votes in that by-election than we did in the 2021 municipal elections, more actual votes. We got 45% in that ward, unfortunately. And what we saw is that one party managed to consolidate the people who didn't vote for us, and this is evidenced by the fact that the ANC support in that ward collapsed into the single digits, completely collapsed. And in a low turnout by-election, another party narrowly pipped us. But then in the Eastern Cape, we won a ward from the ANC for the first time in Blue Crane route. And if you look through the electoral history of that ward all the way to 2000, the DA has never won that ward before. We never even got close. The most votes we ever got in that ward was just over 700. And that was in a general election and in full municipal elections. In a by-election, we got over 1,000 votes in that ward. And again, a low turnout scenario. So I think what that tells you is that opposition voters are highly motivated in this election, and that should give you a trend for what's about to happen in the general election, and that they're very confident in the DA, and that what Blue Crayon Route also shows, and some of these other by-elections, is that there are swings happening from the ANC to the DA, allowing us to get, even in places where we get 70 to 80% of the vote, we're now getting 90% of the votes. And it shows that South Africans are ready for change. Thanks.
Dion, yeah, will handle the PHP question, and then John will wrap it up.
Thank you. Before I go to the Anglo sale, I just want to speak very briefly on the social relief of distress grant and its conversion to job seekers grant. Now, what we've said before is that we would absolutely guarantee the grants that are currently in place. Also, very importantly, is that there is no doubt that our economy will grow. If you take the DA's proposals and put them into place, our economy can only grow for the simple reason is that we have government in the way. So our economy is actually artificially suppressed at the moment. It's like having a big stone placed on top of it. The moment you lift off the stone, you immediately have a rise. And that is the problem that we have in our economy. And that brings us to the Anglo matter. You cannot lock a business into an economy. You cannot force a business to do business with you or stay in your country or in your jurisdiction. This is a very sorry indictment of what we have under the ANC government's failed and misguided economic policy. It's all about sentiment. So what a DA-led government will do, the very first business that we would do, is that we would go across the world to the international marketplace and pass out that message very simply is that South Africa is under new management and our economy will operate differently. We're going to remove these barriers and we're going to make it easier to do business in South Africa. And that will already lift all of the boats in this river. That is the problem here with the Anglo sale. The reason why they are doing it is because they've lost confidence in our economy and they are buying forward cover in case we have a massive problem after 29 May. We don't know what it would look like. And if it is not moving in the right way, watch what's going to happen with business. Watch what's going to happen with the rand. We all know what is going to happen. So that is the reason for this. It is all about sentiment. And as I said before, sentiment doesn't cost you anything actually. It is what your policies are, like we've put them today, and also implementing them and the political will to fix the mess that we're in. And we have it. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for the questions. I would start with the load shedding question because I think there's some important things that need to be dealt with there. You see, what the ANC is trying to do is to try and manipulate, once again, the South African people into thinking that load shedding is a thing of the past. Now, like most magicians, it's not really magic, it's sleight of hand. And they distract you with one thing while they're doing something with the other hand. And that's exactly what's happening here under the current Minister of Energy, called the, what was he called by government? The project manager of energy in South Africa. And they're burning billions of rands worth of diesel just to keep the lights on, to create the impression to South Africans going into the last stretch of the election that everything was all right. But everything is not all right, because if you look at the available energy factor, available energy supply factor, it has not improved. And that is the real measure about how much energy is going back in the economy. Response to a parliamentary question posed by Dr. Mimi Gondwe, our Shadow Minister of Public Enterprises, shows that over the last 5 years, this government has spent 65 billion rand on burning diesel. 23.38 billion rands worth of diesel was burnt in the last fiscus 23-24 alone. So don't be fooled by the manipulators again. The same manipulators who promise jobs in every election and after the election they don't appear. The same manipulators who promise water and housing and all these opportunities and then dissipate. Don't be manipulated in this election because they are manipulating you to think that load shedding is a thing of the past while they're planning load shedding up to stage 16. And I will bet my life on it that as sure as night follows day, after the 30th of May, when the election posters come down, load shedding, stage 6 and up will be back with a vengeance in South Africa, because it is not sustainable to spend these billions of rands burning diesel when you're not addressing the root cause. What would we do differently? Well, we would have embarked upon the process of opening up the industry far more and breaking the state's monopoly. And that's exactly one of the things that lies at the heart of this new policy that we've put on the table today. It's getting the state out of the way in areas where it shouldn't be having monopolies. And so having an energy monopoly and thinking that you're going to fix Eskom and that's going to fix energy security and supply in the country is a fundamentally flawed way of thinking. We have the wrong vehicle to provide energy in South Africa. And the moment we open up that industry, we smash the state-owned monopoly, we open up a greenfield industry of renewable energy, of independent power producers around the country, that's when we will really start to liberate the country from this particular issue. On grants, the biggest threat to grants in South Africa, the greatest threat to social grants in South Africa, is a collapsing economy. Because if the economy continues on the current trajectory that it is, with massive high debt servicing costs, with a massive crowding out of spend on the social sector by debt servicing and wasteful expenditure, like the billions we've seen being spent on VIP protection services. We see even in eThekwini this last week, the mayors and executive there have put aside 25 million for new vehicles for themselves. All of that crowds out the spend that we should be focusing on the social side and job creation. And the biggest threat to the viability of social grants in South Africa is the ANC's continued mismanagement of the economy, which is why this economic policy is a clarion call for growth, for real growth that creates jobs, lifts people out of poverty, and ensures fiscal stability and viability for our country that will re-inject confidence, where we won't see people wanting to leave the country, people wanting to take their investments to other emerging economies around the world because they will have confidence in the South African economy. And so for those South Africans at home who are worried about the fact that you've sat at home for 2 years without a job, that you worry about how you're going to provide for your children's future and your schooling, this policy is the best example about help being on the way. And I encourage South Africans to read it. I encourage analysts to interrogate it. We're happy to defend it. But for goodness sake, let's start a proper conversation in South Africa about growth and jobs, because we've been fed a foofy for the last 30 years, and it's time now to get serious about jobs and job creation. Natasha, I'll end with your particular question. And I think that the story of South Africa 30 years on can be much like a rugby match, divided into two halves. I think we had 15 years where things were moving in the right direction. And I've always been a critic of the ANC, but I'm the first to admit they did get a lot of things right. They did build houses. They did focus on trying to address the issues. And our country was moving in the right direction. I think we had a sense that we were a nation with purpose. But the last 15 years, the second half, has been fundamentally catastrophic for our country. And it's wiped out and reversed many of those wonderful things that we were on the path to achieving. Unemployment, people pushed into the unemployment queues. Corruption that has seized all of the ball bearings of state. Nothing moves in government unless somebody's getting a kickback or there's some contract. A president with dollars under his couch, which are still not been adequately explained. The Zondo Commission exposed the wide-scale rot within our public service and how the state is being systematically looted. And who suffers at the end of the day because of all of that? It is our citizens at home. And so I think it is not too late to rescue. I don't think it's too late to restore. And I don't think it's too late to renew. And I hope as we reflect on this 30th year of democracy, that we realize that in this 30th year, that our most powerful weapon as citizens in a country is our vote. And that we use that weapon in this democracy to be able to force the spring of change in the country, to be able to get a new government in place that's going to get serious about the things that we need to do. We can do better as a country. We can do better as people, and we can do better as parties. And this economic policy that we present today is us coming to the table and saying, this is a plan that we believe can lead the restoration, that can lead the renewal, and can lead the rescue mission to get our country out of the terrible, low growth, high debt, high unemployment trajectory, where children are literally starving to death while the president flies a plane above them where million-rand meals are being served. That we can get water into the homes and into our businesses, that we can get energy back into our economy. But none of those things happen by osmosis. They happen through an act of the will and voters using the power that they have to be able to move the hinge of history in this 30th year of democracy in the right direction that's going to open up a whole new door of hope, opportunity, and prosperity for all. And that's my reflection on the last 30 years. Thank you.
Hloni, I think you've got a follow-up. Okay, cool. Let's start with Hloni, and then we'll have your clarity and then close it off. Oh, and I see Jacaranda FM also will have a question. So this will be the last set. So for clarity, we'll start with Hloni. Sisanda will do the follow-up that you need for your clarity, and then Jacaranda FM. Do you need to put their mic here, Rob? Cool. Let's do it now. Just do this. Just do it like this. Yeah. Cool. Hloni?
Okay, thanks, Solly. Hloni Mtimkulu from ENCA. I have a few questions. The first one is just on the logistics of this. Who is targeted? I know there's a bit on small businesses, haven't been able to get through the whole thing, but who exactly is being targeted and what are the timelines beyond the 29th of May? And also given the country's history and the overwhelming number of poor people black people being the face of people who are jobless. And then my second question is around where will the jobs come from? I think Peter did ask this, but just in terms of when you look at the provinces, and I think the last stats say unemployment figures or employment figures that were released for Q4 last year, there are some ANC-led provinces that have higher numbers than, for example, the DA-led province, which is the Western Cape. So just in terms of that, what could be going right in those provinces and what guarantee is there, I guess, that the DA will be able to create those jobs when the ANC seems to be creating jobs in those other provinces? And then my third and fourth question, I think, are basically the same issue, is around the doing away with racial targets and using the SDG goals or SDGs as a marker of whatever it is. Does that also include doing away with current redress policies? I think I saw something like that there. But also, when, again, the overwhelming majority of the unemployed are of a particular race group, is there an issue with realizing that you will have to essentially target a lot of previously disadvantaged people to address your unemployment? And yeah, just the explanation of why we're not calling it what it is.
Okay, cool. Sisanda, for your second bite.
Thank you very much, Solly. I asked what type of evidence do you require the indigent to provide the Department of Social Development? If someone is job seeking, should they provide their CV or their proof of application to different possible employers? If someone is intending to start a small business, would you need a business plan from them? I'm trying to see what kind of evidence would you require in order to approve someone for that grant, and what kind of vetting process would there be to see whether or not someone qualifies? Thank you very much.
Thanks for that reminder. I think there was an oversight. We forgot that part, so we'll deal with it. The gentleman from Jacaranda. Okay. Just wait for the mic.
You know, when you talk the economy, there's always the question of redress. And I think the perception out there is that the DA doesn't believe in that, particularly based on the value of what you call equal opportunity. So just make it clear whether the DA would think that BE is still needed or whether it's required in a different form. And when it comes to labor laws, what part of the current labor laws do you think is restrictive as you've captured in the document? Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. I think Matt and Ashor, the chunk of those are for you guys.
My apologies for that, Sisanda. I did miss the second part of your question. So yes, you would be able to provide your CV and proof of job application, or you could alternatively provide your business plan to the Department of Labour, who would then be able to verify it on an online system. There is some more detail that is provided, and I can provide you with that afterwards if you'd like, with the more specifics. Then just regarding Cloni's questions and possibly to tie those into the UFM questions specifically, who is targeted? All South Africans, regardless of their background. Ultimately, we have a country that has very high poverty, inequality levels, and we should be trying to uplift the most vulnerable in society through our policies, and that's what I believe our policy aims to do. In terms of breaking it down per province, that is not a calculation that is necessarily being done, because we're not focusing on specific provinces, but rather trying to put in place industrial reforms, and those would then generically come out in the areas where these reforms are and where people decide to locate their businesses. In terms of the numbers which you indicate that the ANC provinces have outstripped the Western Cape, you'd have to be a little bit more specific on those and provide, well, I think we need to provide the numbers so that we're able to have a look at those numbers and for us to be able to see what it is that you're talking about, because you are merely making a statement and I haven't seen the evidence, so I can't necessarily respond. But what I will say to you is, if you look at the recent numbers that have been done by the Western Cape Provincial Government, 4 out of 5 jobs over the last 4 years have been 5 years have been created in the Western Cape, and that has been tested and that has been checked. And that shows you that the Western Cape, by virtue of their infrastructure-led growth model, as well as the enabling environment which they have created, are the only province that are truly able to deliver on economic growth and job creation. And this is why people are flocking to the Western Cape to be able to seek out economic opportunity. I want to also briefly touch on redress, and I know that Ashor would like to weigh in here as well. But I think we can all agree that the historical effects of colonialism and apartheid have meant that the vast majority of South Africans find themselves in inequality, poverty, and terrible economic circumstances, and we can agree on that. However, what we must acknowledge is that the past 30 years of race-based policies have failed to uplift people from poverty and put them in a position where they live a life of dignity and they are able to move up the opportunity ladder. And I think that our alternative model, which focuses on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals model, focuses on getting businesses to leverage investment in these communities before they do business with the state, so that we can empower communities on things like decent work, no poverty, clean energy, which are some of the Sustainable Development Goals. And by virtue of whoever it may be who falls in that category, because we're targeting poverty, we will predominantly focus on black people in any event. And I think that the tired old trope that the DA wants to do away with redress is an unfair one, and one which has failed to actually take into account the policies which we have put forward and the policies which we aim to implement. But I'll hand over to Ashor to add some more detail.
So let me just start on jobs numbers and which ANC provinces have been better. No ANC province has been better at creating jobs. Let me just put it to you clearly, and this is data from an analysis from the Center for Enterprise Development. Since 2015, the Western Cape has created nearly 400,000 net jobs, while employment in Gauteng has fallen by 55,000. So the province here where we are, that's supposed to be the center of the economy, it is. It's the largest economy in the country. It is the beating heart of the economy. Employment has fallen by 55,000 jobs since 2015. So I think that shows you the clear difference between how the DA creates jobs versus how the ANC destroys jobs, even where you've got a good industrial base, you've got better services. In Gauteng, it's actually quite startling when you look at the raw data. But let me get to the redress question, because there were a couple of things about that. I think it is a fallacy to suggest that the only mechanism through which you can achieve redress is BEE. What is BEE? It is the idea that government procurement, and only government procurement, is a way to transfer resources to poor people or to people in need. And what has it actually achieved? The enrichment of a political elite. I mean, the Guptas were beneficiaries of BEE, and they weren't even South African or didn't live through apartheid or inherited any of those sorts of disadvantages that the rest of us in South Africa did, but they benefited from it. So let's be clear that redress does not equate to BEE. And I think that there's a problem with the Overton window in South Africa when we can only conceptualize redress as being BEE. The DA put together in 2020 a policy document called the Economic Justice Policy. And part of that is using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Because what we're saying is, instead of giving shares and money to a handful of political elites who happen to be of a particular race, but actually are of a particular political party, and make you very, very wealthy, and it's only a few people who benefits, rather look at what is the most important impacts that we can get for society, particularly in poor communities. And so the Sustainable Development Goals look at, for example, upliftment of women. It looks at protecting the environment, particularly in poor communities. And all of the things that make life livable, that ensure investments are channeled into poor communities, and that instead of making someone a billionaire, you rather spend billions of rands on people who are in need of redress. And so instead of a BE scorecard that says to a business, okay, you've made an ANC member very, very wealthy, we'd rather say you've invested all of these resources into communities in need of redress. And that is what we try to achieve. And so we've completely reconceptualized redress as the transfer of resources from one elite to another to the upliftment of millions and millions of poor people. And that's what please go and have a look at the Economic Justice Policy. It makes it very clear, but that is the intention of what we want to achieve with our redress policies. Thanks.
Thanks, gents. We're going to close it now, and those of you who want to do one-on-ones, I know Hloni wants to do one, will have the opportunity to do that. But as always, thank you very much for coming to our press briefing, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
DA Leader John Steenhuisen. What qualifies the DA to run the country?
Firstly, we do not tolerate corruption. And where the DA governs, life is better. And that is why millions of South Africans are moving to DA governments. We still have much more to do. But in the past year, the Western Cape created over 300,000 new jobs and is working every day to become load shedding free. We can bring this DA difference to the rest of South Africa, but only if you vote for the DA.
Well, there you have it, an economic policy that will uplift all South Africans, create jobs and empower South Africans. But I'm now joined by our DA Shadow Minister of Finance, Ashor. Sarupen. Ashor, you know, a lot of complicated things were set up there today. For the ordinary South African that doesn't know the ins and outs of economic policy, what does this mean for the ordinary South African?
I think we've been stuck in the ANC's conceptualization of economic policy for 30 years now. And this is, for the first time, a proper, meaningful change and a clear path to create jobs. And over 5 years, the DA can create 2 million new jobs in government if we implement our policies. These are costed policies. These are policies that make sure that we create decent work, that make sure people aren't dependent on grants and aren't going to be looking for peace jobs that the ANC calls EPWP. These are real jobs they're speaking about in the private sector that will ensure that we begin to uplift people and solve the unemployment crisis in our country.
Now, Ashor, what are the key focus areas of this economic policy and why were they chosen?
So I think the key focus areas are the things that make the economy work. So unlike other parties who say, we're going to pick a winner or a loser, and then they say in this industry, and then when they get into government, it doesn't work. We're saying, how can every business thrive? How can every business create more jobs? How can in every part of the country we create more jobs? We're not saying, oh, well, the DA will create jobs in the Western Cape, or the DA will create jobs in Gauteng. We'll create jobs across the country, because we're going to focus on horizontal policies that apply everywhere. We'll make sure that the basics are in place, that a business needs roads that work, they need electricity, they need water, those basic things. And we'll get those right. We'll make sure the safety gets right. And then we'll build up on what we call the pyramid of developments so that we can get a skills base so that businesses have quality workers who can contribute meaningfully and are productive and work our way up from there. So it's really a full horizontal application across the economy.
Now, I can imagine to create such a comprehensive policy, a lot must have gone on behind the scenes. Can you just give us a little bit of a background? What does it take to create such a comprehensive policy?
I think at first you start with a proper analysis of the problem. So we're not ideological about it. We say the problem is that we have mass unemployment. What causes the mass unemployment we have? What are the issues? Once you've got your diagnostic right, got a bit of a sneeze there. Yeah. Once we've got the diagnostic right, then we move on to making sure that we look at what are the actual solutions for the problems we have. And then you consult with experts. And again, we weren't ideological about it. We consulted across the spectrum, but we found the best and brightest minds in economics in South Africa. And we asked them to please contribute. And we took the best advice that we could find and we put it all together. It's many months, of course, of work, but we also did modeling. So lots of parties will say 2 million jobs. When Jacob Zuma was president, he said we'll create 5 million jobs, nothing came of it. We actually had proper external modeling of these policies to see what would the impact be over 5 years of DA government, and that's where we came to 2 million new jobs. So it is not only some person in the back room writing a document down with a number. It has been a properly researched, tested set of assumptions, and based on that we can say to the South African people that if you elect the DA, we are fairly certain, based on proper mathematical modeling, that the DA can create 2 million jobs over 5 years.
No, we love it. Now, can you tell us how does this policy differ from, previous economic policies, current economic policies, and do you believe that we really can turn the South African economy around?
Yes. So I think the first thing to understand is that this particular document moves away from this approach of picking winners and losers. So, for example, the ANC has now for 30 years protected ArcelorMittal in the steel industry. But all of the downstream businesses that are dependent on steel are closing down. So we're losing more jobs, and ArcelorMittal is retrenching people at scale. So we've stopped that approach of picking winners and losers, because then you artificially prop up a failing company and you don't create jobs. And rather we looked at where's the job creating potential, what do you do there? So it's a complete overhaul of the ANC's failed approach. It also is non-racial. So rather than saying we want to only empower people on the basis of their race, but what really happens then is you empower people on the basis of their political party card membership, we're saying we're looking at empowering as many people as possible, and we're going to uplift the poor by focusing on non-racial policies, because the moment you make it about race and not about poverty, what happens is that the same rich elite who happen to be all members of a certain party go and take all the opportunities for themselves because they have the insider knowledge, they have the contacts, they appoint the staff who are administering these programs. And we're saying we're putting an end to that closed shop arrangement, and we're making sure that opportunities are available to all South Africans.
Ashor, in closing, what would your final message be to the people of South Africa in the run-up to this crucial election on the 29th of May?
We've tried the ANC's failed policies for 30 years now, and more people are living in poverty and in unemployment now than at the start of our democracy. The other parties are offering ANC policies on steroids or trying to be ANC light. We are offering South Africans today a way out of the situation and a way into jobs. And if you vote for the DA on the 29th of May, you're not going to be getting ANC light. You're not going to be getting failed policies. You will be getting policies that are proven to create jobs. And you don't need to take my word for it. Just look at where we govern. In Gauteng since 2015, employment has fallen by 55,000 jobs. This is the place where jobs should be happening, and it's not. In the Western Cape, 400,000 jobs were created over that time. So what that tells us is that where the DA governs, you will find a job. And if we can do that nationally, we can really change South Africa fundamentally.
Thank you so much, Ashor. South Africa, you heard it here. We can rescue South Africa. We can build an economy that creates 2 million jobs and uplifts people from poverty. We can end load shedding. We can end job shedding. We can create jobs, but we have to vote for a national government and provincial governments that represent all their people. And we can only do that by voting for a DA government on the 29th of May. Now, if you want to find out more about our detailed plan to rescue South Africa, to grow our economy, you can go to rescue.southafrica.org.za. And if you are unable for any reason to vote on the 29th of May, go to where-to-vote.da.org.za and we can help you register for a special vote. But remember that applications close on the 3rd of May. Thank you so much for tuning in, South Africa. I hope you're as excited as I am as we move towards this crucial election on the 29th of May. My name is Kwena Maloto. Keep the faith, South Africa. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
In 2006, the Democratic Alliance won Cape Town by just 1 seat.
With just 42 votes, he recently won Ngeni.
Because people voted for change.
DA-run Midvaal is now the best-run municipality in Gauteng.
And a new story was written for the Western Cape when people voted DA.
But if you want a new government that works, then you have to vote for it.
In this election, every single vote will count. Your vote can rescue South Africa. Vote DA.
Thanks for watching. All across our beautiful country, people are joining forces to elect the new government that can rescue South Africa. Like and follow us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Please share our videos with friends and family. Let's rescue South Africa. Vote DA.